inviting me along, and privileged to be associated with such a respected slew of speakers. And thanks to all of you for getting up so early in the morning. Now, so who am I and why am I here? I'm here to talk about arrogance and confidence in design. And you might well ask, well, who is he and why is he talking about this? Well, I'm Jonty Sharples, as discussed. I'm UX Design Director at Albion, London. And in the last 13 years or so, I think I've seen good and bad design and most things in between. When I first started out, and I'm not going to pretend, I wasn't the avid reader, the passionate flag waver, or the quiet genius. No, I freelanced. I bumbled about, watched an awful lot of Columbo, and drank an awful lot of tea, and flicked through books by TDR and Attic. And I produced an awful lot of unimaginative bilge. What had happened was I'd happened across a career that I could accomplish with the minimum of effort extended on my part, which selfishly allowed me to get a pat on the head now and again and an ego massage from the odd nice client. I didn't really have any hours to keep, and I didn't really have a boss. And that was it. I kind of found job paradise. So that was my honeymoon. And as with many things in life, without any real challenge, I soon realized that satisfaction couldn't be found producing yet another 12-inch sleeve using Neuropol. Does anyone remember Europol? 1998, kind of big, went high street in about 2002. Anyway, using all sorts of gradients and vectors and not really bothering and using clip art and stuff. Fortunately, I had a friend. His name is Mike, and he's a Swiss German, and he's one of the most committed and passionate designers I've ever known. And he introduced me to Swiss School. And that was that. I went and borrowed this book, and then I went and bought this book, and this is The Grid System by Joseph Müller-Brockmann. If you don't own it, you should buy it. It's remarkable. This book actually changed my life. I mean, I still watched Columbo and I still drank tea, but I began to really pay attention and consider what it was I was doing. I began to respect my craft and my clients and my output. And the little things that I've been too lazy to do in the past, like putting all my fonts into a font library, and I started doing that sort of stuff. And I also started keeping a sketchbook for the first time since college, and I filled it with scribbled ideas, grid systems, type experiments, names of books that I couldn't afford, and I began to talk about my work passionately. And prior to that, I don't think I actually remember having a conversation where I was passionate about what I was doing with anyone, and probably because I was producing derivative nonsense. Now, you can probably gather from this little tiny potted history, I've seen good and bad practice and been party to both. I've also seen and been intimately involved with arrogance. Good and bad practice we can usually agree on. Good and bad design is a little trickier but easily polarized, because what in one instance may be considered good design may well be utterly inappropriate in another circumstance, and therefore be considered bad. But it's when we move into arrogance that things become a little bit obscure and the shades of grey begin to emerge. So what do I mean by arrogance? Hang on a moment. Well, there are two types of arrogance I'd like to address today. Now, the first is essentially laziness, and this is sloppy and uncaring thought and execution. Whether the work is paid for or voluntary, someone somewhere is going to get shafted, whether it's your boss, your clients, your colleagues, or your end user or audience, as we'll call them today. If you don't care about your work, you can pretty much guarantee your output will be crap. And this sounds terribly obvious, but to some extent it is. What I've noticed over the last decade is that this lack of engagement appears endemic in our industry, the big D design industry. And I don't care if you're a UX practitioner, mini maker, producer, developer, whatever. Every single one of us contributes to the design of products, both virtual and physical. And as such, we have a responsibility to not only our end user, but our profession as a whole. And certainly as we mature and the digital industry continues to expand and it embeds itself across new sectors, and as we convince those with little or no understanding of what we do that they absolutely must buy what we have or be doomed to failure, we need to ask ourselves, are we setting the right thing here? Are we selling the right thing? Are we setting people up for failure? Are we getting the right people to do the jobs? I'd be pretty annoyed if the guy that came around to do my wiring was a landscape gardener instead of an electrician. Which brings me to the second form of arrogance, deception. We are all guilty of deception now and again, and it's not necessarily malicious or vindictive, targeted or intended, but we all deceive on a fairly regular basis, and it's this deception that underpins arrogance part 2. There are those that sell apples as oranges, and there are those that hope no one will be any the wiser and they will get away with the perfect crime. There is a murkier side to this form of arrogant deception. This is the dark pattern makers, the subversive designers, the copywriters of fine print. It's the designers of train carriages like this one that squeeze extra bodies in tiny seats but don't allow enough space for a normal person to walk down the aisle. Penny Mordaunt, who's the MP for Portsmouth, said, a seat on which one cannot sit is a seat in name only. And this is when a load of people who live in Portsmouth and use the South West Trains line to and from London complained about the carriages. And South West Trains came back and said that the criticisms of the carriages were mere comfort concerns, which is nice. It's the designers of budget airlines whose seats are actually only 44 centimetres, who have a whole row at the back of the plane where the seats don't tilt back and you get 20% less legroom. And all over the place there are little tiny bits scrimped and saved, and you know, there's money to be made in saving space and being arrogant. It's still arrogant design because it's saying, look at the audience. You know, they won't believe that we're doing this. And when they finally realise that we are, they'll be too tired to do anything about it, and they will do whatever we ask of them. Having said this, there are slowly but surely a bunch of quite committed people who are taking a stand against this kind of deviant behaviour. Harry Brignall from Clear Left has a fantastic blog on dark patterns. And dark patterns are essentially the sneaky stuff that means that you've got car rental insurance, seat reservations, priority boarding and credit card payment charges on top of your flight before you realised and you bought your ticket. Or in this case, this one's brilliant. This is from Ticketmaster in the States. Ticket price is $27. There's a facility charge of $3, a convenience charge of $10.20, and then you get to the bottom and there's an order processing fee of $4.75. And that comes out at around $45. So at this point I usually go into bad-mouthing a well-known product design company, but seeing as this is being recorded, I'll look at a product designer instead. Now, for clarity, I should say that I love Philippe Starck, but he's responsible for producing an awful lot of very mediocre and poor architecture and product design. And before I hold him up to be the epitome of arrogance, I should say that this is one of my favourite pieces of design ever. And the quality of the design may rest on it being his product. It's got his name on it. It's a house, and it comes in a box. And it's actually the schematics for a house, so it's got a little videotape and some plans and a hammer and a little flag for topping it out. It's fairly straightforward and quick to build, so long as you don't build it in a desert. And the idea is that you can get most of the wood and the timber materials from sort of nearby, wherever you're building it. But somewhere along the way, Starck reached this sort of weird design plateau. He'd been doing his thing for so long and been fawned over by the Alessis and the Thompsons and the hotel magnates and praised for his success that he kind of got to the stage that there was no genuine struggle to get things made anymore. He no longer had to fight his corner. He created fairly utilitarian bits and pieces. So, you know, there's the Starck toothbrush, there's the television sets, there's the stools, and he put his own little twist on it. And then it all kind of fell over. And I suppose the lesson here is, as soon as you begin to get your own way all the time, the hardest thing to do is remember that you're designing for others. And really, if you dig about and have a look at some of the reviews, the customer reviews online of his products, you get an awful lot of stuff like this. You know, it's lovely, but it's crap. And Starck, for me, exemplifies the amalgamation of both streams of arrogance, both sloppy and uncaring thought and execution, and deception. And just because it's left your drawing board, it doesn't mean that you don't have a responsibility for the product anymore. So we must have confidence in order to take risks and risks can be good, and risks can generate the amazing. And this is pretty amazing. This is Stark's urban house turbine, and it's fairly cheap. It's available in transparent, so it's not an eyesore. It's extremely quiet because it's on the vertical instead of the horizontal. And during a preview in Milan, he said, energy should not be a punishment. We should create a desire among people to produce it. I would love to see them on sale in supermarkets. I mean, he's always going to say the last bit because he wants everyone to buy them. But the point is, he's created this thing that he wants everyone to use, and everyone could use it because it's fit for purpose. So after a success like that, though, it's important that confidence does not convert itself to arrogance, because arrogance is a bad thing. This is Judy Estrin. She is one of the co-founders of Cisco. She's on the board at Stanford. She's a director at Disney and FedEx. And she has a fairly firm view on the fine line between confidence and arrogance. And to paraphrase her, she says, arrogance indicates you're not listening to your customers or your employees, and that you're not looking at your competitors honestly. And this is why researchers and user experience practitioners, developers, interaction designers and visual designers weave in and out of projects all the time. There should never really be a stage in a project where people are working in a bubble on their own. Equally, if we believe that a meeting has happened or an email has been sent and our role is then fulfilled, then we're not doing justice to our own work, let alone considering the consumer. So Stark is an ideas machine, and like most machines, every now and again something wonderful pops out. And when I was at school, I bought the Taschen monolith for the coffee table. And if you flick through it, you'll see how much garbage there is. There's the odd nice chair and the odd pretty lampshade and door handle, but nothing of any real substance. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why in 2009 he threw the most amazing design hissy fit ever and quit. Or said he was going to quit. And he said, I was a producer of materiality, and I'm ashamed of this fact. Everything I designed was unnecessary. And then he said, design is a dreadful form of expression. Not sure about the last bit, but... And I don't think everything he designed was rubbish, but has anyone used this? Anyone? Has anyone seen one of these? Right, okay, a couple of people. Has anyone seen one of these? Has anyone used one? Right. So they're both useless and magnificent examples of form over function. And more importantly, arrogance in design. I'm still curious as to how the lemon squeezers got into so many public collections at museums. And the kettle will burn you when you try and heat water in it. Does anyone own one of these? They're pretty popular. They've made tens and tens of thousands. It's the Anna G by Alessi. I have, actually mine's in my bag, I was going to get it out but I won't bother. It was a gift from a friend some years ago, and you pop the bottle up her skirt and you twist her head down and then you squeeze her arms and the cork comes out. Nice, except it's not, it's crap, it doesn't really work. This isn't Stark, by the way. It's actually by a chap called Alessandro Mendini, who's one of the godfathers of Italian product design. And it's by Alessi, and I can't really take Alessi seriously anymore. They just produce so much lovely twaddle. It's getting a bit embarrassing. I mean, there is fun and then there's functional. So the long story short, the Anna G has an auger screw. This is my one, by the way. It's a molded thread. It's really cheap to produce. It acts as a wedge. It tears your cork. And it's not terribly effective, which is why people tend to use worm screws, which are a bit more expensive to produce, but they do the job properly. Which is why there's a worm screw on pen knives, for example. These are much, much better for moving water uphill and drilling holes in ice. And it's a shame, either Mendini or a bean counter was responsible for this, and it's arrogance on a massive scale. You've got a premium designer, premium brand, massive markup, and basically he drew this thing on a drawing board and then someone at Alessi stuck a corkscrew in it. And there's a smugness behind the design. Look how cute it is. No one will care if it doesn't work properly. We're charging a small fortune for it. It's a premium product. The ever remarkable Don Norman has written at length about emotional reaction to design. If you haven't read this book, go out and buy it and read it. It will explain a lot. And he makes a great case for design as art. Briefly, he has 3 teapots. He loves tea. He has this one, which is a tilting teapot, which has 3 stages. It starts on its back and you put the leaves in. No, it starts upright. No, it starts on its back. You put the leaves in, you add the water, it starts brewing. You tilt it, it slowly, the water pours through, and then you tilt it and it's fully vertical. And the leaves are no longer in the water, so you don't get stewed tea. And the second is by a French artist called Jacques Kalman. And actually it's designed for coffee, but he uses it in his example as a teapot. And this is obviously a coffee pot for masochists, because the spout is above the handle, so you can't use it, you'll burn yourself. And the third is the Nana by Michael Graves, and it's a pot that Norman says, it's so ugly that it is appealing. Now, which one do you think he uses? Anyone? Anyone? Sorry? The tilted one. Well, actually uses all 3. But he's got one of the most remarkable CVs known to mankind, and I'm really trying to address the masses, not a guy whose hobby it is for collecting idiosyncratic design. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think quirky innovation or humour should be banished from design. Some of the most beautiful and joyous products and design experiences are garnered as a result of delivering a little hit of delight alongside functionality. Surely though, if a product is manufactured and marketed as being able to perform a certain function and it cannot, then it's garbage. Carmen's teapot doesn't work for a reason. Stark's kettle doesn't work because it's crap. So let's put kitchen gadgets aside for a minute and think about what it is that we produce. Can anyone think of a digital product or service that's been released in the last 18 months that is a bit like Stark's kettle or Mendini's corkscrew, that's like, ooh, and then, oh.
UNT mobile wallet.
Good.
Google Plus.
Ooh. So, lovely physics, but my God, after a couple of hours it got so boring. Look, I'm just going to add some friends. Here we go. Right, yeah, there's Jim. Let's put Jim in. There's Jim. Right. Whew. And Ben. God, this is tiring. So, it's lovely and pretty, but it's just a bit crap. Anyway, this is Zach Holman. He works at GitHub as a developer. And he wrote a fantastic piece just after this came out called "Don't Give Your Users Shit Work." And my tech director, Andy Bowman at Albion, tends to trot this out in meetings quite a lot, and quite right too, he absolutely should. Essentially, if most of my time is spent filing stuff and shifting stuff around in order to get the very best experience out of your product, sod off. This is why Instagram, rest in peace, was so damn good. I can go from a photo to upload in about 8 clicks. There's no shit work. Like, I don't need to file, I don't need to like, I don't need to tag if I don't want to, I don't need to caption, it does everything for me. It can be at any fidelity. Now, I fell out of love with my fuel band about 7 days ago after 31 days of use. For a variety of reasons, but can someone ask me the time?
Time is it?
Hang on a sec. 9:20. It's as simple as clicking a button, but it takes forever for it to tell me the time. I have to click 2 buttons to tell the time. We are modern day product designers. Admittedly, some of us are a bit more B&Q homewares than Heels lighting department. Some of us are more Kawasaki tunnel boring machines than Dremel multi-drills. But we are all designing products much of the time that people use daily. Now, Stark said of his little wooden house, when you have a good idea, try in all ways to make the best thing for the most people possible. If you succeed, that means the idea was good. Popular is elegant and rare is vulgar. That's kind of at odds with much of his practice, but it does make sense. So remember, the goal of industrial design has always been mass-produced and standardized objects for consumption by millions and millions of people. But just because we're designing primarily digital stuff these days, and just because it has to be used by millions and millions of people, it doesn't need to be boring. Pixar nailed it with movies. Dyson, I believe, have nailed it with their products. There is joy every time my aunt turns on her Dyson. She loves it because it does everything she wants. It's light, it moves fast, it picks up the dust, but it's utilitarian. She can put it away and forget about it. In Gary Hewitt's Objectified, Karim Rashid says, "It's crazy. Imagine if you design 1 million chairs today. Why on earth would you have an uncomfortable chair? Why not? The only reason for uncomfortable furniture is that it's not been tested and it's not been validated. And it's either laziness, stupidity, a lack of budget, or all three." So think about the work you've done over the past few years and where you've produced a pretty but rubbish corkscrew or been party to a slimline train seat. Now that we've defined arrogance, I've got my rant out of my system a bit. I thought I'd show you some examples from some people who have normal jobs where they've been arrogant in the last 12 months. So this one's from a dev. It was bringing up a paywall in order to register after 10 clicks. So have you been through the registration process 10 times? Paywall pops up. Doing a quick, maybe not best solution for a problem because of time pressure and because I didn't want to open a can of worms. And I think we've all done that. It's like, if we don't ask too many questions, I can go home at a normal time. Using the same stats to argue both for and against a decision with a different client. Oh, good stuff. And this is my favorite. I designed myself an amazing 3-part interactive wedding invitation with interchangeable maps that reveal the details when the recipient put them together the right way. The only problem was that they were a pain in the ass to make, so rather than redesign, I simply crossed 50 people off the invite list. She won a bottle of wine off me for that one. I can't tell you her name, but it's remarkable. So what we see is a bit of a pattern emerging. Essentially, it's laziness with this bunch. It's not necessarily malevolent. It's just a natural reaction to circumstance. You know, we're all overworked, rushed, tired, harangued, perhaps a little bit bored with our jobs. And we end up cutting corners. And with many people in the design industry, it's really easy to become complacent. And I am guilty of that also. Now, I should footnote this by saying that laziness isn't wrong per se. We're born lazy. Human beings are actually designed lazy. And the only thing that stops us from being lazy is motivation. So carrot and stick. And sometimes there is no carrot and sometimes there is no stick. All there is us. And what it boils down to is passion. If you're not passionate about what you do, go and do something else. I don't mean that if you're less interested in the product that your client is selling to their customers, you should go and do something else. But if you're not interested in the process of delivering the very best to them and to the client, then maybe you should consider another career where you are engaged and you are interested. In very much the same way that doctors take Hippocratic oaths, perhaps we should endeavour to do something similar, just maybe less therapeutic nihilism. Now, I believe a culture shift is in order if we're to continue to produce good work and combat this malaise. Obviously, it's not such a good idea to go around pointing fingers. We've all got mortgages and rents and families and loved ones and jobs and careers and bosses and clients and colleagues. But if it's possible to make just the tiniest shift in attitude and mindset from within an organisation, then I believe it's our responsibility to do so. If we care about our jobs and our audience and our work, we need to take a stand against arrogance in all its forms. Dieter Rams, you knew he was going to turn up eventually, is a bit of a poster child for anti-arrogance in design. He was responsible for many functional and beautiful objects. And he also has some pretty clear thinking about how we should go about design. And one of his 10 that I would put under my pillow, I was that way inclined, is this. Good design is thorough down to the last detail. Nothing must be left to chance or arbitrary. Care and accuracy in the design process shows respect towards the consumer. Good, thorough, detail, care, accuracy, respect. Try and live by it for 24 hours and see how you feel about your work. Now, I'm going on and on and on about design, but if you only write RFPs and do Gantt charts and you never put a pencil to a sketchbook, don't think that you're not part of this process. You are. Many of you attend these kind of events and you have time to visit drinking establishments with your friends, and you can talk passionately to your colleagues and your peers about what you do. Hopefully you read books and watch documentaries and go to museums and lectures outside of your field. This is anti-arrogance, and we all have an understanding of what represents good and bad design practice. We are all better than it'll do. We can push ourselves past going for bronze, and we don't have to settle for let's just. By studying the successes and the failures of our forebears in the industrial and product design fields, we can avoid the inevitable pitfalls that ultimately lie ahead in the creation of digital products and services. And with this cultural shift, we can all be involved in good design and good design practice. Because good design is either delightful or unnoticeable. It is never arrogant. Thanks very much.
What design or designer is most exciting you at the moment?
I'm not impassioned by anything at the moment. Everything that I loved or have loved, or love at the moment, or previously loved, has been sort of debased by someone bigger. So, like, the last thing I really loved was Instagram, and it got bought by Facebook, and I closed my account. And I loved it because they'd thought so clearly about not giving me shit work. They thought so clearly about providing a very, very clear, pure experience. I've tried 9 other applications since leaving Instagram, and nothing matches it. I've stopped taking 3 or 4 photos a day. Now I'm down to maybe 1 every 2-3 days, because it's not instant. You know, there's an effort involved. I store all my photos on Flickr. I upload some photos to Twitter. If I do it with anyone else, I have to go through 2 loads of sharing, and it's just a pain, and the filters aren't as nice, and the cropping's not as good, and the depth of field isn't, you know, it's a whole melange of not great, and when you found something perfect, you don't want to go anywhere else. So, yeah, there's nothing for me at the moment, really, I can think off the top of my head.
How do you deal with clients that want shit design?
I don't think any client wants shit design. What clients tend to say is, I don't want to pay for this, or I don't want to do it this way. And what we do at Albion, and what I've tried to do sort of all the way through my career, apart from the bit at the beginning with the tea and the Colombo, is basically, here's my process. This is how I do things. Now, you've got 100 quid, let's say. Now, we can do just this, which is the wrong thing to do, or I can do little tiny bits of the whole process in order to get you the best possible thing for your 100 quid. And when we do internal user testing and validation at Albion, we often do it with staff, or with staff from other offices, because the clients don't have the money, so the best thing to do is to validate. If we can find the money later on by proving that validation is important and engaging the client's trust in the process and with us, then that's brilliant. And you get people coming back going, that was really good. We didn't think we should pay for it, but actually the insight you've given us is valuable, and it's teaching us about ourselves and our customers and our product.
It's a 2-part question. There's a growing movement for designers to be part of the startup culture on the west coast of the States. Do you think that that's a good idea? And secondly, how do you get designers to want to be a part of that early startup kind of process?
So you get, in most instances with sort of lean startups, you tend to have people with really, really broad T-shapes. So massive amounts of empathy, and then very, very sort of strong craft skills. So whether you're a dev who has a really good design aesthetic, or whether you're a designer that has a really strong coding background or a coding appreciation, that's how you get these people together. I think there's kind of like in my industry anyway, there's this sort of UX unicorn. And the UX unicorn used to be, I think it's moved already in 6 to 12 months. It used to be designers, UX people with a good aesthetic head who can code, and that's still a constant. But now it's actually finding really good UX people who have a firm design aesthetic and an empathy for code. It keeps evolving. I don't believe that you shouldn't be a jack of all trades. You should have that single craft skill, but you need to have empathy. You need to understand what other people are doing and have an appreciation for how hard it is.
Is there such a thing as appreciating bad design?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, oh, I've got a photo. I mean, it's kind of bad design. We've just had the second floor of our offices restructured and stuff, and they did the toilet cubicles. And there's a sink. As you walk in the door, there's a sink there, and the door folds backwards. And as the door folds backwards, it goes dink as it hits the sink. And there's like that much space between the door and the sink, and I love it. Because someone was like, oh, right, so we might have a problem. Like, I don't think the doors are going to fit with the sink there, and there's nowhere else to put the sink. But I love it. Every time I go in there, I'm like, this is brilliant. There's someone out there going, yes. So yeah, I do think you can appreciate bad design, and I think that is bad design.